Hello everybody, this is Ed McKnight. As you can see, I'm a Skitarius today. I mean, I could be a night pilot, but given today's topic, I think I'm going to stay a Skitarius today. So yeah, why am I a Skitarius? Well, because today we're going to be talking about the history of the Codex Adeptus Mechanicus, starting from the first release in 2015. This actually takes me back. Before we go, obligatory block redirection if you want to read instead of listen. In which case, I guess somebody pointed out to me that if people wanted to read instead of watch videos, they wouldn't be on YouTube anyway. So I don't know why I'm doing this, but yep, if you want to go to my blog post, you can just go there. Anyway, this actually takes me back because I wanted to do this. I was doing this series of retrospective articles, blast from the past, that kind of I guess, very funny historical series. That's not really history because, but because my background is I'm more of a literature student than a history student, but I have a minor in history, so I think that counts, right? Anyway, I think I actually wrote a stupid post about this back then, but because I was kind of immature, it was more of a rant on how I actually hated Cult Mechanicus than an actual proper article. Oh well. Anyway, old timers might remember how the Adeptus Mechanicus faction was split into two codexes in 2015. I don't know if I can be considered an old timer. Strangely enough, I think I'm older than many of the youngsters who have just newly come into what is an increasingly expensive hobby, but there are way more experienced veterans than me who have played third, fourth, fifth, maybe even sixth editions, while I only started at the late tail end of sixth edition or early seventh edition. So I got the sixth edition Knight Codex, and then a few months later, it turned into seventh edition. So uh, I don't know what to say. It's kind of weird. Coincidentally, I started my blog just a couple of months before the release of Codex Skitarii, and I ended up jumping on the bandwagon. Not because I'm a fan of all things new or a slave to the new hotness or a meta chaser or whatever, but I had always been a fan of the Adeptus Mechanicus, as you can see on the screen, thanks to the Caphias Kane novels. I think that's how you pronounce his name, right? Caphias Kane, Saphias Kane, Caphias Kane, I don't know. Anyway, I'm a big fan of Sandy Michel's novels. In fact, I think it was Sandy Michel's novels, the Caphias King series, that actually got me into the hobby in the first place. And that's why I have an Imperial Guard army, because I've always followed the Imperial Guard novels back. And that's what actually got me in the hobby. So originally, because when I first started the tabletop gaming aspect of my hobby, Warhammer 40,000 hobby, I didn't know Adeptus Mechanicus or Skitarii was going to be released in the next few months. I didn't know, in fact, I didn't even know there was an Imperial Knight faction until I actually walked into the game shop and saw the Imperial Knight box, and I was like, yeah, that's going to be my primary faction. My original faction, my original intention was to start with an extra military army, actually, Imperial Guard army, because I always loved the Imperial Guard thanks to reading all those Imperial Guard novels. It wasn't just Sandy Michel's Kafaiski novels. I think I was also reading Steve Leon's Dead Man Walking and a bunch of other Imperial Guard novels. I think there was also a Wahalan Ice Warrior novel that I read. I think we called them Ice Guard. So, I'm a very much an Imperial Guard person until the whole Adeptus Mechanicus and Imperial Knight thing came out. So back then, the Skitarii were known as Tech Guard, the Forge World's version of the Imperial Guard, and they were nothing more than cyborg guardsmen wielding hell guns. So if you read all those novels like Bank Counters Dark Adeptus, for example, which is what I think the second novel in the Grey Knights Omnibus, you read the various mentions of the Skitarii in the Caphias King series until I guess lately. I don't know if the latest novel counts, but they kind of Sandy Michel basically updated the lore. So we have Castellan robots and stuff in the new Adeptus Mechanicus military arm in the latest Caphire novel, which is pretty awesome, by the way. You should check them out if you haven't. So yeah, you could essentially represent them as Kid Bear's cyborg guardsmen with stormtrooper rules, if I'm not mistaken. And there was this old fluff where the Skitarii of the Forge World Ryza possess armored columns of Leman Russ executioner tanks, because Ryza are specialized in plasma weaponry, and Leman Russ executioners are the plasma variant of the Leman Russ tanks. It's really awesome stuff. And yeah, and now that I'm mentioning the Kaphiaskin and I guess Dr. Adeptus as well as the Priest of Mars, we should also mention Graham McNeil's Mechanicum, which really cemented my love for Imperial Knights. His in Priest of Mars trilogy, which is now known as the Forge of Mars, because I think there was a new short story he added to the Forge of Mars. Time really flies because I read this back when it was kind of fresh. So yeah, I didn't know Imperial Knights existed as a faction. I mean, I read about it in Mechanicum, but yeah. Eh. Anyway, if you guys are lost, well, I apologize for that. But I think this is kind of important because it illustrates just how in flux the fluff and lore of Warhammer 40,000 armies are. Before we had a codex for Adeptus Mechanicus, Games Workshop, which is a company that focuses on miniatures, basically left it up to the individual Black Library authors to imagine the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Skitarii however they wanted. There was a consensus, though, a common thread. Most of the Black Library novels that mentioned Skitarii before the advent of their codex always represented them as cyborg guardsmen with hellguns. You do have variety, so if you read Dan Abnett's Titanicus back then, those were berserk Skitarii warriors with access to camps and drugs, as well as some wild uniform that made them look barbaric. And then you have Graham McNeil's Skitarii in the Ultramarines omnibus, who also made use of the same camps, L camps, I guess, friend zone or something like that, paired with augmatics, mechanical limbs, and even close-up melee weapons. So in this, the Skitarii are less a shooty army, but more of a close combat army with all these strange augmatics and cybernetics that allow them to, I guess, have blade arms or something like that. It's pretty wild. And in Graham's Priest of Mars series, he also had this awesome Skitarii Secretary who commanded the Skitarii legions, and they were riding in modified rhinos and had access to commonly recognized guard tanks like Leman Russ and Chimeras. I think Sandy, Michelle, and Ben Counter, though, they had Skitarii being guardsmen with cybernetics and hellguns, and that they aren't that different from the Imperial guardsmen, other than having a bit of cybernetics or augmatics, and having the powered up version of las guns, which are hellguns. Now they're called hotshot las guns. I don't think hellguns really exist as their own weapon anymore. Then in early 2015, and I think it's announced in March, just a couple of months after I started this blog in December 2014, they came to this announcement: Codex Adeptus Mechanicus Skitarii. Suddenly, we had a bunch of new lore based on the new miniatures designed and invented by Games Workshop. Radium carbines? Huh? Radioactive infantry? That's the Skitarii Vanguard. And the Hellguns have been replaced by something called galvanic rifles. To be fair, a lot of the designs, particularly the Skitarii Rangers, hoods and rebreathers and goggles, were inspired by already existing artwork, such as the cover for Mechanicum, which was written by Graham a few years prior, I think in 2008. So, well, actually, it's not a few years prior, it's actually 7 years. Almost, maybe a little under 7, because I think this was the end of 2008. And this was March 2015 was like, early 2015. So it's maybe 6.5 years, I don't know. But you can see the similarities and inspirations. The Skitarii finally had an army and model range of their own, having been mentioned in the lore for decades, but they didn't actually have a representative miniature range on the tabletop. That all changed, and I was eager to collect an army of my own. So, yikes, I can still remember the early 2015 articles in my blog as I assembled and painted them. They look horrible back then because I never bothered with the Martian Red and instead did some boring combination of black and gold to match my knights. As you can see, they didn't really work out. They look kind of plain. I mean, it's literally just two colors and I didn't base them. This was my very early hobby. This is back in 2015. So, hopefully my skills have improved back then. You saw my blog stuff, and the beginning of my video, you saw my new Mechanicus Steam Light. So I leave it to you to judge whether my painting skills have improved. Anyway, shortly after Codex Skitarii, we had this Cult Mechanicus. What the hell? Yeah, I was just as confused as everyone back then. I was happy with Skitarii because most of the mention in the Imperial Guard novels I was reading back then, like the Cavalier's Cane novels, the Dark Adeptus, the Priest of Mars. I mean, Skitarii was basically the face of the Adeptus Mechanicus military arm. Yeah, when we talk about the soldiers of the Machine God, the warriors of the Omnissiah, we are referring to Skitarii. So why do we need another codex? What's with this weird Cult Mechanicus codex? Back then, I didn't really care too much because I was more than eager to run the Adeptus Mechanicus War Convocation in White Dwarf, because back then we had this, I guess, weekly release. Now it's monthly, but back then White Dwarfs was a weekly release where you release a magazine every week or so with, I guess, not hints, trying to advertise the new model range. So kind of like spoilers, but not really spoilers. What do you call them now? Previews, that's right. They will show previews of the upcoming codex release, which was Skitarii at the time, and they were like, you can combine all of them and run your Skitarii, Cult Mechanicus, and Knight together in this thing called the Adeptus Mechanicus War Convocation. And I like robots, so I was happy to collect a bunch of Castilian robots because they were like the new plastic version of the very very cool Battle Automata and Siege Automata range from Forge World, which was expensive and incredibly hard to get back then, I believe. I'm referring to the Horus Heresy Mechanicum, Legio Cybernetica models. I was new to the hobby back then, so despite what everyone claimed about the Adeptus Mechanicus War Convocation being cheesy and overpowered, I could never win a game with them. That's not important, though. So yeah, my skills have evolved, upgraded, improved over time. So hopefully, I'm winning more games than I did back then because beginners don't really win that many games. Now, anyway, that's not important as I said. The real question is, why the hell did they separate the codexes or codices? I don't know what's the plural form. Is it codexes or codices? Anyway, couldn't they have just combined them into Codex Adeptus Mechanicus like they did in 8, 9, and now 10 edition? Well, hindsight is 2020. There was no way I would have anticipated them combining both codexes in future editions back then. Hell, I didn't even know there was a new edition on the horizon about 2 years after the release of this codex. I mean, this was back when 7th edition was fresh, I guess, 2014, 2015. I was like, who would have thought 8th edition would come in 2017 and just shake up everything? Even back then, I remember writing about how I didn't think Codex Cult Mechanicus was necessary. I didn't like the models in there. I hated the Electropolis. I wasn't very fond of the Cataphrone aesthetic. And I thought the Castana robots were inferior to the Forge World range of Castellax, Battle Automata, and Tanata Siege Automata. I love the Skitarii Codex, but I couldn't say the same for the Cult Mechanicus one. But apparently there was a reason why they separated the two. The answer lies in Gunhammer's interview with James Havitt, who used to work for the rules team in Warhammer 40,000 before joining the team for specialist games. The link is in my blog, so if you want to look out for the original interview in Gunhammer, you can go to my blog or you can just look it up in Gunhammer itself, because Gunhammer is a very big blog and much bigger than mine. And I'm pretty sure a lot more people read that than my blog, so yeah. Anyway, the cynic might claim that Games Workshop separated Skitarii from Cult Mechanicus to sell two different books and therefore make more money. That it was a profit-oriented decision. Sorry, I can't speak well. Anyway, that didn't really make sense because it was unlikely that they would make more money from selling two separate codexes for a single army. Firstly, books didn't have a high profit or margin. Games Workshop relied more on selling miniatures for profit than books and codexes or codices. Secondly, your expenses will increase because you have to pay double for binding, color printing, and other overheads, only to sell them slightly cheaper than all the overall processes that goes into publishing and printing these books. So yeah, that as a business decision, it doesn't really make sense. Well, no, it's nothing as insidious as greedy money-grubbing capitalists. Instead, the answer turns out to be strangely mundane and silly. So I'm just gonna read out the interview in case you guys are doing like a not voice recording, an audible, and you guys aren't actually looking at images. Some people drive or do hobbying while listening to videos, so I'll just read it out. So James, the Skitarii and Cult Mechanicus back in 7, which should have one combined set of rules, they got two sets of special rules because otherwise you don't sell two books of special rules, you sell one. And Luke from Gunhammer. And interestingly, they got combined back together in 8, James, and they should have been. They always should have been. The reason they were split was because of a logistics thing. It was then when White Dwarf was weekly and they could only show 1 week's releases at a time. And if you put out an army book in week 1, then you show off the releases for the next one. And secrecy is paramount, quote unquote. If you can't show off the future releases. If you put it out in week 2, it looks like the releases in week 1 were coming out without an army book, and that doesn't make sense. And there was this whole ridiculous, the tail has often wagged the dog in Games Workshop in different ways, and this was a fantastic example of that. Look, okay, sorry, can I just clarify? The reason that in 7th edition they were two separate armies was publishing requirements of White Dwarf? James, there you go. It was like the Skitarii didn't have any characters. I had to write a codex. There were no HQ choices, so how do we do it? We had to make up a new detachment for them. Similarly, things like the Skitarii didn't have any transport options. Look, so you work on 40k as well? James, oh sorry, yeah, I did. Did I not say that? Look, No, you didn't mention that at all, James. The rules didn't work on everything. 40k was just ubiquitous. It was always just there in the background. It was probably the least exciting part to me, churning out codexes that are 80% the same as the previous edition of the codex, with a few new bits. The Skitarii book was a rare exception, a chance to do a whole new army from scratch. But yeah, the transports thing. We had to come up with this whole thing because they didn't have any transports. And this comes back to the thing I was saying earlier and how it goes miniatures, then background, and then rules. The miniature stuff is so close off, we didn't get to know what was happening in the future. So when the background was written for them, the background stuff was emphasizing how they walk everywhere. And we wrote rules around the idea of them not having transports, hence the scout rules bracket. So when I saw the transports come out a couple of years later, I went, oh come on! That's just rewritten a huge chunk of stuff. But hey, look, wow, that is just bizarre. So yeah, that's basically yeah. So yeah, the reason that they separated Skitarii from Cult Mechanicus as two separate codexes was because of logistics, to adhere to the publishing requirements of the then weekly White Dwarf. And a bit about the transports, which we later know to thanks to hindsight, that they are the Archaeopter Transvector, which is the flying transport, the cool, I guess, steampunk thingy, and the Scorpius Dune Rider, which is the schemer, the open top schemer. I think a lot of people said they were HVG. I can't remember what they were called. But yeah, it's this pretty cool like boat-like transport where your Skitarii just ride in an open top vehicle. It's pretty cool. That brings me back to my original point about the lore and fluff always being in flux. In the beginning, before Codex Skitarii and later Codex Adeptus Mechanicus were a thing, the authors had to come up with their own idea of what Skitarii do and have. So back then we had Hellguns, modified rhinos, Lehman Russ executioner tanks, servo arms, camps and drugs, or maybe basically cyborg guardsmen that could be easily represented by stormtroopers with a bit of kit bashing. Then the codex came out and all of that became invalid, so no longer was the previous fluff accurate. Nope, the Skitarii had to be depicted according to the codex, and miniatures released by whoops, that's the one. Yeah, here you go. The Skitarii had to be depicted according to the codex and miniatures released by Games Workshop. Hell, not even the codex, just the miniatures. I mean, so we no longer have Hellguns, so instead we now have radium carbines and galvanic rifles. Rhinos? Nope. Now we march on foot. Lehman Russ executioner tanks? We don't need them anymore. We have Onegan Dune crawlers. They admittedly look cooler. I mean, who doesn't like spider bots? And this was like, I think, what was it, like 8 years after, no, 8 years after Supreme Commander, because Supreme Commander was released in 2007 if I'm not mistaken, with a giant monkey lord spider bot. So who doesn't love spider bots with a laser on top? That's basically Oregon Dune crawler. Oh yeah, and do you remember all those cool robots from 1980s and 1990s that used to fight alongside Space Marines? They used their own complicated programming rule set, and I think even epic models actually. Well, I think I did a whole video on that, so you can look for the video on Legio Cybernetica, the history of Legio Cybernetica / Imperial Robots, or my blog article on that. So yeah, whatever you prefer. Anyway, these robots make a comeback in the form of Castalian robots, and the Forge World's then new Horus Heresy series, because I think it was like 3 years old at that time. The Horus Heresy game system back in 2015 was like 3 years before, so 2012. Yep, so 3 years old. Yeah. So yeah, the Legio Cybernetica stuff. Anyway, the fluff lore had to be updated too, and Rob Sanders wrote 2 new awesome novels about the new Adeptus Mechanicus. Oops, this was meant for the Priest of Mars, but never mind. Yeah, so Rob Sanders wrote 2 new awesome novels about the new Adeptus Mechanicus, which rewrote all the previous iterations of Skitarii and Battle Servitors, and featured all the new models in their full glory as they fight against the Iron Warriors. So the protagonist of Skitarius is Skitarii Alpha Primus Heldron 44 Stroika. I guess he'll be what you call a Skitarii Marshal now that we retroactively added the Skitarii Marshal in the 9th edition codex. So yeah. So as the protagonist, Heldron 44 Stroika, Alpha Primus / Marshal, he had to lead his Skitarii forces, which were first decimated by Iron Warriors on the fallen Forge World, where the Mechanicus tests out a new Gala bomb constructed by a recently discovered standard template construct. And then Magos Explorator Omnit Tokora. These are really weird names, but yeah. He's the protagonist of Tech Priest, the sequel to Skitarius. And he picks up the fight and against the Iron Warriors and struggles to outwit the superior Traitor Legion with his dwindling Skitarii forces and Titan support. So yeah, but seriously, the Rob Sanders novels about Adeptus Mechanicus are amazing. I know some people complain about them being product placements to promote the new Skitarii and Cult Mechanicus models, but these are amazing story. These two books are amazing story in its own right, and there are a few twists and turns that make reading both novels engaging to the very end. The ending is very awesome. The ending is also pretty awesome actually, and a great FU to the Iron Warriors. You can tell that my Son of Dawn bias is showing. Both books have been collected as the Adeptus Mechanicus omnibus. You're looking for an ebook. I'm not sure if they still sell the hardback or paperback copies. I think they've been out of production for years in terms of physical copies. I mean, but you're looking for ebooks that are conveniently compiled in the Adeptus Mechanicus omnibus. So anyway, as I said, the Skitarii lore, the war gear, the weapons, and the equipment have all been rewritten. So no more Hellguns. Instead, we have Arc Arc Pistols, Radium Carbines, Galvanic Rifles, and Plasma Calibers. And the Transurianic Arquebus. Sorry, I can't pronounce these weird exotic names right. Oh man, the Plasma Calibers especially are pretty cool. I think it was in Skitarius where Stroika 44 Heldron 44 Striker. How do you pronounce this name? Jeez, man. I'm supposed to be able to speak it binary, but because you can see my avatar as a Skitarius, but never mind. So he was using this plasma caliber and he was shooting these awesome blue globes of plasma at one of the Iron Warriors. Yeah, that was like that made me go wow. And then you had the Cataphrone Destroyer that makes an appearance in Tech Priest. I think the Electro Priest feel kind of forced and shoehorned into the narrative, admittedly, but I think the rest, other than the Electro Priest, which had some weird civil war dispute in the middle of the novel. Other than that, I think the rest of the two books are great. I think it's not just Rob Sanders' two books, as I mentioned this earlier, but in the latest Fighters Kane novel, when Glorious, Castaner robots make an appearance in the forge world he's visiting. In The War Master and the Anarch by Dan Abnett, upon the forge world of Adesh, the Skitarii now wield galvanic rifles instead of hellguns. Gave Trotop's Imperator Wrath of the Omnissiah also features modern Skitarii and even a Castaner robot that is supposed to defend the Imperator Titan from boarding traitor marines. I also need to mention that the Horus Heresy and Sage of Terror novels that were published after the Codex's releases. So I think Aaron Dembski Bowden, for example, writes about Skitarii using Radium Carbines and Echoes of Eternity. Not to mention the more Codex-like Skitarii in the Master of Mankind when they fight alongside the Legio Custodes and the Emperor in the War of the Wet Way. Hell, I think a Skitarian assassin even shows up in the Master of Mankind. I think it's like a Rastalker Princeps actually, so it's pretty cool. We also have that in Rob Sanders' Cybernetica as well. For some reason, Rob Sanders picked up the slack after Graham McNeil uh, in 2015. So Rob Sanders ended up writing all the Mechanica stuff and Mechanicum stuff in Horus Heresy instead of Graham McNeil, which was kind of a weird choice. I'll go into more that later. But in Cybernetica, Skitarii Rangers wielding galvanic rifles with rappelling? No, not rapping, rappelling out of a freaking Valkyrie. Yep, an Imperial Guard Valkyrie, or in this case, it's an Imperial Army Valkyrie, I guess. This was back in 2015, before the release of the Arcopter kit, so it probably be retcon now. So instead of Valkyrie, you just imagine it being an Arcopter. Oh, and I almost forgot Guy Haley's Wolf's Bane, though I believe that featured more forgeable models like the Myrmidon, the Talaxi, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry. Cybernetica, Automata, and the Tech Priest of the Mechanicum, as opposed to the orthodox Skitarii that we see in the 41st millennium. In fact, I've seen arguments from older Mechanicus fans that the Talax, I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that damn thing. But the Telex is closer to what they imagine the Skitarii line infantry will be, as opposed to the Vanguard and Rangers. Because they are tougher cyborg warriors, more nightmarish, and they have more of the gothic and grimdark aesthetic to their look than the Skitarii. I don't blame them for that, though I sometimes wonder if they are more caught up in the heydays of Forge Wars, Horus Heresy's New Beginnings. I mean, honestly, when I think of Skitarii, I imagine the kind of rogue cyborg infantry as depicted in the cover of Graham's Mechanicum's novel, as opposed to the Talax, because the Talax just don't look Skitarii to me. Interestingly enough, as I said, I haven't actually seen Graham McNeil write any new Mechanicum or Mechanicus or Skitarii stories after the Codex. As I said, Rob Sanders took over that, and now I don't know what happened to Rob Sanders. I don't think I've seen a novel by Rob Sanders in the last few years actually. So that's a bit concerning. I did like his work. He also wrote for the Beast Rises series, if I'm not mistaken, and quite a few other novels. But I really like his Skitarius and Dagris novels. And Cybernetica not so much. I'm not a fan of Cybernetica, but um, yeah. Graham McNeil, though, I think even though he doesn't write any Skitarius or Mechanicum novels after the Codex release, I think he's still often called upon to pen the Thousand Suns stories set during the Horus Heresy, such as the Crimson King and the Fura Magnus. These are relatively recent novels, written in the last 2 to 3 years, I believe, during the whole Stage of Terror thing. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I like his Thousand Sun novels. His Thousand Suns novels are like one of the best I've ever read. And I also like John French. So you ask, I can't compare the two. I just like both of them. So let's keep it that way. It's not a competition anyway. So we have the best of both worlds. But I'm kind of curious. I wonder what Graham McNeil's take on the now official Codex Skitarii and Mechanicus will be. Now that we have the official lore, the official models and miniature range, would he, have a different take on them? I know Dan Abner also had to kind of, conform to the new miniature range. Hence, his Skitarii ranges are using galvanic shredders, I think, galvanic fletched rifles, instead of the old lore where he had them being, uh, berserk berserkers, close combat berserkers in Titanicus, which was kind of cool. Well, even the Codex is not immune to retcons and changes, which is kind of ironic given that the Codex is kind of a meta reference to Rubute Guilliman's Codex, which most Space Marine chapters adhere rigidly to. So 5 years later, because like I said, this was in 2015. So now 2020 came and we had Psychic Awakening Engine War. So 5 years later, new models and miniatures are released. Did James mention how the Skitarii march on foot because they don't have transports? Well, now they have Scorpius Dune Riders and Archaeopter Transvectors to ferry them around. Yeah, I ought to do a Psychic Awakening video one day, but not today. So Psychic Awakening Engine War essentially expanded the range for Adeptus Mechanicus in May 2020, or to be precise, the range for the Skitarii, because we didn't really have much for Cult Mechanicus. I won't go over the lore here, that's for another article, as I said, but maybe one day I'll do a whole lore video on the Psychic Awakening series. But we basically had 9 new units for Skitarii, including the Cerberus Raiders and Cerberus Sulphurhounds, which made up the Cerberus Corps, the Phyrexii, is that how you pronounce that? Phyrexii? Yeah, Phyrexii? I don't know whether the P is silent or not. The Sterilizers and the Skystalkers, basically. And then you have the Scorpius variants, the two of them, the Scorpius Dune Rider and the Scorpius Disintegrator, which is the tank that shoots either the Ferromite cannon or something like that, or the Belloran. I had, you know, basically Belarus cannon. Yeah, Belarus. That's what it's called. So it shoots this either anti-tank or anti-infantry cannons, and they are energy weapons because Mechanicus. So why the hell not? And then you had the Archaeopter that had 3 variants: the Transvector, the Fully Safe, and the Stratoraptor. Am I forgetting anyone else? I don't think so. So yeah, I activate the Skitarii legions because all these new units are for the Skitarii. The Tecris Manipulus, who first appeared for Kill Team, was finally incorporated into the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex for 9th edition in May 2021, along with the newly released Skitarii Marshal, who was the Mechanicus new character model for that edition. Then you have the Techno-Archaeologist, who was originally Daedalus of Blackstone Fortress fame. I'm talking about the board game, not the actual Blackstone Fortress, but we had this whole board game that was released around Blackstone Fortress, where you had this rogue trader dude who's exploring the inside. Darius Hinks wrote a few novels on that, so if you guys want to check it out, check out Darius Hinks' Blackstone Fortress novels. So these two models, which were actually from another game system, two different game systems actually, they were retroactively added to the Adeptus Mechanicus range and received roles in the 9th edition Codex. Thanks to that, they doubled the HQ choices for Cult Mechanicus, with the Skitarii Marshal giving us a grand total of 5 HQ choices, which, when you consider that we only had 2 in the 8th edition Codex, is a vast improvement. But you'll notice that aside from the character HQ models, The new models are all Skitarii. So yeah, aside from the Tech Priest models, I mean, even the Skitarii Marshal and the Sidonian Scatros, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Sidonian Scatros. I know Sidonian is correct because I watched Sidonian Knights. It's a manga slash anime. So yeah, but Sidonian Scatros is the new sniper character who was added in the 10th edition Codex in November 2023, and he has the Skitarii keyword. So yeah, he's Skitarii. So aside from the Tech Priest and which two of which were actually released for separate game mod systems, there are actually no new Cult Mechanicus models since their first release back in 2015, which is kind of sad if you think about it. But I don't really care about Cult Mechanicus. I'm more a Skitarii person. Unfortunately, this division kind of remains in the new upcoming codex or the new, release codex. I mean, Skitarii has the Skitarii keyword. Skitarii have the Skitarii keyword, sorry. And the Cult Mechanicus, with the exception of Castellan robots, will now have the Legio Cybernetica keyword. And I do hope you'll be getting new cybernetical robot models in the future. Come on, Games Workshop, please give us new plastic robot models. They have their own keyword as well. And the army rule only benefits Skitarii units, so unless you take the data sum conclave, you probably wouldn't be getting much out of your Electro Priest. Thankfully, the Cataphron servitors have access to Doctrina Imperatives, I don't know, like the Skitarii, so it's just the Electro Priest and Castellan robots, unless you could run Cohort Cybernetica, who don't. Also, if you're astute enough to attach your Tech Priest, not Electro Priest, to Skitarii squads or even Cataphron units, they also get Doctrina Imperatives. It's a kind of holdover from when they were separate in 7th edition, I guess. At least they answered that Tech Priests and Cataphrons have access to Doctrina Imperatives, and these are kind of pointers for the Castellan robots anyway, since, you want them to be running up and doing melee, not shooting. So the heavy, unless you're doing like pure shooty robots, I don't think the heavy weapon, giving their weapons heavy actually does anything for them. Well, enough of these blasts from the past. I just thought it'd be interesting to revisit a trip down memory lane and indulge in nostalgia. Because, it's been like 9 years, or 10 years actually, because, well, almost 10, because I started my blog around December 2014. Adeptus Mechanicus came out in 2015, and now it's like, what, April 2024. It's insane how much time has passed since then. I can't believe I've been doing this hobby for that long. Even more surprising that my blog has actually persisted for almost 10 years too. The YouTube channel is just new, but like I said, I'm a blogger. I've seen many blogs come and go, so I don't know what happened to many of the bloggers I used to follow over the last 10 years. Gary Nafka is alright. I hope Gary Nafka is alright because his Fight 212 blog hasn't been updated for, man, almost a year now. Maybe he's caught up in real life, I guess. And Kadia's Creed blog, I used to follow that because, like I said, I love Imperial Guard. But I think he sort of gave out on the hobby when 8th edition hit. So yeah, it's kind of funny, but how many blocks I've burned through the world. But a lot of the old guard are still around, I believe. I mean, Winter Seal, which I've been following since what 2015, 2016, because he used to do this cool battle reports. He also does Horus Heresy battle reports, I believe. Used to watch that, and yeah, this is the way the world ends. Yeah, that's a real cool quote. So at least he's still around. But yeah, I do see a lot more new content creators now, though. Lol YouTubers, I guess. Where I guess that's partly why I also started doing my own YouTube channel. But but yeah, like but most of them seem fairly new. I mean, Arbiter Ian has been around for what, 3-4 years. Cool blog. I think Chapter Master Warrock too. Uh, yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, I know a lot of people are complaining about the new Adeptus Mechanicus Codex, but I've been having a lot of fun with the Skitarii Hunter cohort. I might do some Crusade videos where, if you've been following my blog, you see that I played some Crusade games and I write them in story form. So I might actually try and do some videos on that, but we'll see. I don't know. I'm kind of busy with graduate school, so yeah. Anyway, until next time, bye.